Good morning, all my beautiful patrons. Today we're going to be working on this new look sewing pattern. I've showed you this before in previous videos, and we're going to be doing the version E, which is the shortest skirt. This pattern comes with 5 different versions. So there's 3 different skirt versions, and then there's a pair of pants and a pair of shorts. So this is A6271, or which when I looked it up in the book, it was just 6271. So I'm not sure whether the A applies to every place that you may find it, but I did find this one at Walmart and I paid $2.97 for it. So for this particular pattern, you're going to need at least 1.5 yards of fabric. I'm going to be doing the drawstring version. So with these, all of these patterns, you can either do elastic or a drawstring. So it's completely up to you which one you do. And they do have cutouts for both the drawstring and the elastic. So yeah, so you're going to need at least 1.5 yards of fabric. I always overestimate on my fabrics because I like to make sure I have enough. So I have 2 yards of fabric in the purple here, and it's always nice to have extra fabric because then you can use it for other things if you have anything left over, or add pockets, or whatever it is you choose to use the extra fabric for. So we are going to deviate from this basic pattern today, and I wanted to go ahead and do that because this is kind of about as basic of pattern as it gets, and I wanted to give you a little more of a challenge. So we're going to add pockets. So you will be able to print this off. It will be in the video description probably, and it's just a Word document, so pretty much everyone will be able to print it off. And this is about as large as I could get it to print, so, but it is large enough for your hand. So that's what I was trying to get. I want a large enough pocket to be able to fit my hands in because I'm kind of a pocket person and I don't have a lot of clothes that have pockets. So I wanted to go ahead and add a pocket into the skirt, you know, that way I could just put my phone in it, or just have some place to put my hands or whatever. But, you know, you'll be able to print this off. And then I'm also including this little diagram. I found this just on Google, and it's just a diagram that kind of shows you how to insert the pockets, and I thought it would be nice for you guys just to be able to print it off. That way you can just, you know, refer to the diagram instead of having to go back to the video itself. And it's just a nice little tool to have on hand. So I will also provide that for you. So along with your pattern, you're going to need your fabric. Like I said, the pattern calls for 1.5 yards. I have 2 yards of this purple with white polka dots. And I got this at Walmart for $2 a yard. So at my Walmart, I rarely ever find printed fabric for $2 a yard. Normally it's only solid, so I was excited to be able to find this. And then for my contrasting fabric, that will be for not only my pockets, but for my drawstring, is going to be this white fabric. It's just plain white fabric. And to be honest, this is an old sheet. Well, it's not an old sheet. It's never been used. But I used to use this as a backdrop for taking pictures of my crochet items and everything, and I don't use it anymore, and I hardly ever used it for that. So I like to use sheets for actual fabric because you can get a lot of yardage in a really nice cotton sheet for, you know, a decent amount of money. So that is definitely a trick that you could keep in mind if you're trying to sew on a budget, is definitely check out sheets. When I go thrift store shopping, or yard selling, I always look at the sheets and see if I can find really good quality sheets that aren't really worn. And I will, use them for lining in bags, or depending on the sheet, I may even use it for skirts or anything else like that. So definitely keep that in mind. That is a little trick that I learned from my grandmother, who grew up in the Great Depression when they had to use what they had. So I like to be able to be as inventive as they used to be. So this basically is a brand new sheet that I've only used just to hang up a few times. And so any cotton sheet will work. And if you can find a printed fabric or a printed sheet that you really like the fabric on, you can do the same thing. You can make the whole skirt out of it. But I'm going to be using this white for my pockets and my drawstring. So the other things that you're going to need are, you're going to need your cutting mat. If you're going to be using a rotary cutter, and I have both. I have a rotary cutter and scissors. So whichever you prefer. I usually use a mix of both. And thankfully I got a brand new pair of scissors, so I shouldn't be struggling with it this time. But you're going to need some sort of cutting tool. And like I said, if you're going to be using a rotary cutter, you're going to need your mat. You're also going to need matching thread to your main fabric. I could have swore I had purple thread that matched this, but I cannot find it, so I'm just going to be using white thread when I sew this. It's really not going to make a difference because it already has white in it. And you're just going to go to, of course, need your sewing machine and pins and all your basic notions for sewing. So I have went ahead and cut out my pattern pieces for the skirt that I'm going to be doing. So for the skirt that I chose, which is version E, you're going to need your pattern piece number 3, which is your waistband, number 4, which is your drawstring, and number 6. When you look at the pattern, it's going to tell you to go ahead and cut out number 5, but 5 is the pattern for your elastic, and we're not doing elastic, so you don't really need that piece. So keep that in mind. If you're doing one or the other, you're not going to need to cut out whichever one you're not doing. So if you're doing elastic, you're not going to need to cut out the drawstring pattern piece, and vice versa for the elastic pattern piece. So this pattern piece is, you cut it on the fold, so that's what these lines mean. For anyone who doesn't know, since we're going to be doing the short skirt, we're going to need to pin up this extra piece. And no matter how hard you try, you're never going to get it exactly on the line, so don't worry about it. Just get it folded up to where it needs to be, to where you see the line. I hope you're able to see that. And then just pin it. So I have my pins here, and you're just going to pin it along the line here. And then you're going to take these pieces and fold them in. So I had to check and make sure I was in frame. And then just pin those down. So normally I'm a size 10, but since I'm adding pockets and I kind of want this skirt to be a little more flowy than what it would be on its own, I went up a size. So it won't be quite as fitted. It'll have a little more drape to it. And you can always keep that in mind. If you can change just the design, well, not the design, but the way that your pattern fits just by going up a size. And you don't have to. You can go directly off whatever your measurements were for the size that you need. But for me, since I want it to be a little more drapey, I want to add the pockets, and I don't want it to be skin tight, I just decided to go up a size. So once you've pinned all that down, that's going to annoy me. And you've cut all of your pattern pieces. I forgot to cut my pocket here. So you're going to take your pattern pieces and set them aside, and we're going to roll out our fabric. Normally you should go ahead and pre-wash your fabric. I forgot to do it, so I'm not even going to worry about it. But, you know, throw it, if it's a fabric that's not going to fall apart, go ahead and pre-wash it. That way you don't have to worry about it shrinking. But to be honest, I don't have too much problem with that. So I guess it just depends on the fabric. So since this is being difficult, I'm just going to go ahead and pin these sides together. Just in a few places, just to try and keep these lined up. So we need to take our pattern piece for the skirt and line it up with your fold. And I try to get as close to the edge as possible. I don't like to waste even an inch of fabric because, you know, fabric's expensive. And then we're just going to pin it. And I'm just going to go ahead and pin my waistband right here, because you need to cut 2. So I'm going to go ahead and cut both these pieces, and then we're going to move this piece down and cut another one, because this is the front and the back, so we need 2 of those. And I'm just going to use my rotary cutter. I'll just go ahead and pull my pattern off. And I'll set this piece aside. And we'll go ahead and pull this up. And do the same thing that we did before. So we're just going to pin it down and cut it out. Okay, so I can just set this aside, and now I'm going to set out my contrasting fabric, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut this section off right here, because we don't want that fold. And then we're going to cut 4 of our pockets. So we'll go ahead and cut it here and then move it down and cut it again, because we need 4 of them. I'll go ahead and just pin those together, set it aside, and then I'm going to move it down. So just like that. So you should have a total of 4 of those. And I'm just going to pin this together too and set it aside. So we need to cut 2 of these, so I'm just going to go ahead and pin it. Trying to preserve as much of the fabric as possible. Okay, so you have all your pieces now, so you can remove your pattern pieces. from the fabric, and we're going to turn it right sides out, and then we're going to figure out where we want to put our pockets. So normally your pocket is pretty close to your waist. Your waistband. So you're going to separate your pockets. You're going to put one there and one here. And what you'll need to do is you'll need to measure down from the top. So make sure you can see that. You'll need to measure down from the top and make your pockets, or put your pockets in the same spot. So I'm going to go down about 1 inch, and I'm going to put the top of my pocket 1 inch from the top of my skirt. That's just a rough estimate of where you need it to be. And then you're going to go over here and measure this side too, and put your pocket 1 inch from the top here. I set that one perfect. And then what you're going to do is you're going to pin that. As close to the edge as possible. So just like that. And you're going to repeat it for the other side. And then we're going to go over to the sewing machine and sew this pocket to this panel. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for the other panel. And then we're going to take it over to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch these to each one of the panels. That way they're attached. And then when we put the skirt together, we'll have the pockets attached to both panels, and then we'll just be able to seam around them. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I will meet you over at the sewing machine. Okay, so before we head over to the sewing machine, we are going to take our waistband and our drawstring. So what we're doing is we're taking the waistband and putting the right sides together, and then just pinning both ends. Then we're just going to seam that when we get to the sewing machine. For our drawstring, you're just going to put right sides together and then seam or pin one end. And the other end you're going to leave open. So we're going to go ahead and head over to the sewing machine now. Okay, so we're going to start our sewing portion. My wonderful husband actually bought me a lamp, so you should be able to see better this time. So we're just going to start with the panels of our skirt, and we're going to sew these pockets on. So remember, we're just sewing the individual panel of the pocket to the panel of the skirt, and then we'll put the entire skirt together with the pockets. I have already went ahead and put my coordinating thread and bobbin, so you want to go ahead and do that. Like I said, I thought that I had a purple that was this color, but I don't. So I'm just going to go ahead and use a white thread, and it should look just fine. So we're going to go ahead and seam our pockets now. You always, when you begin, you want to sew a little bit and then reverse just to lock in that seam. Oops, might help if I turn my machine on. And you don't want your seam to be any wider than what the seam of your skirt would be. So my rule of thumb is I have it, when I'm doing pockets, I have it to where it's slightly towards the needle of the foot. Normally when I'm doing seams, my seam or the edge of my fabric lines up directly with the edge of my sewing foot. So that's just a little rule of thumb. So we're going to go ahead and sew the other side now. Okay, so before I move on to the next panel, I want to go ahead and go through the drawstring and the casing with you, and then I'll finish up the next panel off camera, and then we'll come back and sew the whole skirt together. So we're just going to seam this one seam on the drawstring. And then we're going to fold it in half with our seam out. So like this, and you can pin it if you need to. That way your seam's straight. And then we're just going to fold the rest of it in half, and then we're going to sew around the edge. And then we will turn it in. We'll turn it right side out when we're done. So I'm just going to fold it in half. I'm going to leave this end open so we have an opening to turn, and then we're just going to seam directly down the side and then across the other end. Just kind of trim back all that extra fabric, and that'll make it a little bit easier when you're turning. You don't want to get too close to your seam stitches, but you could just trim away some of that fabric. Okay, then you're going to use whatever it is that you're going to be using for your turning tool. I just use a long crochet hook, and I just try to open the little pocket and then push it through. So sometimes I start it with my scissors if I can't get it to poke through, and then you're just gonna, since it's not my crochet hook's too fat, I'm going to be using a long knitting needle, and you should be able just to keep pulling it until you get to the end. It's going to take a little bit longer since it's quite a long drawstring. So now that you have the end, you want to hold on to that pretty tightly so you don't lose that, and you can just pull your knitting needle or whatever it is that you're using, and then you should just be able to pull the rest of it through. So what you can do is you can go ahead and iron this if you would like. I really don't have time today, so I'm just going to go ahead and sew around it. But you'll want to go ahead and sew, you'll want to top stitch. You're going to want to tuck this in Make sure I'm in frame. So tuck the raw edge in. And you may need to use your scissors or a needle or something. Just tuck the end of your drawstring in, and then what you're going to do is you're going to seam across the top, starting with the end all the way down this side, across the other end, and all the way back up. So that will make our drawstring nice and flat. Like I said, you could go ahead and iron this. I really don't have time to do that today, so I'm just going to go ahead and sew it up. Okay, so here's your finished drawstring. So you can just set that aside. And then we're going to seam up the waistband now. So you're just going to go along each end and seam it together. And we'll just set that aside and we'll... Okay, so I've already done my other panel. So what we're going to do is we're going to put right sides together on both of the skirts. And you need the pockets facing out, so where they're outside the skirt. And you just want to line up your tops. So I have my top edge lined up, and I'm just going to pin that on both sides. And that will just keep my skirt in place. So what we're going to do is we're going to seam down this 1-inch portion, then we're going to seam around the pocket. So we're going to go ahead and pin all of that. So we're going to seam the 1-inch portion around the pocket. We're not going to go down this way. We're going to go around the pocket and then down the rest of the skirt. So hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. This will be regular seam allowance, so for me it's the end of my presser foot. So since we did it this way, I just want to show you real quick. You'll have a nice regular seam on your pocket, and you'll be able to, you know, put whatever you need in there. So that's what the inside of the pocket looks like. So what you can do is you can just cut off all this extra if you would like. I'm going to go ahead and seam the other side exactly the same way. I'm not going to go ahead and film that because then this tutorial would be forever long. So go ahead and seam your other side exactly the same, and then we'll meet up and work on the waistband and the hem. Okay, so we're going to work on our waistband now. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to fold it in half like this. Here's the 2 seams, and in the center that doesn't have the 2 seams, we are going to mark 2 spots directly in the center of this waistband. So the waistband's going to fold over like this, fold in half this way, and then we're going to fold it in half this way. And then directly in the center of that, we're going to make a line on this side. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to go over this with our buttonhole stitch anyway, and then a line on the other side about the same width from the edge. And that's going to give us our slots for the drawstring hole. So to attach our waistband, we're going to start with turning our skirt right side out. It looks like that. And we're going to place our skirt inside our waistband. So we're going to find our two sides. So we're going to find our two side seams and pin those together. Now the right sides are together. And we're going to do that to the other side too. So I hope that you're able to see that okay. And then we're going to pin, put a pin right in the center. On both edges, so we have all four sides pinned. So just like that. And then we are going to seam around the edge. Okay, so we have our band pinned on. You'll want to pin it to where you can have your little pencil marks towards the band. That way we can kind of look back and see where we want it to be. So what we're going to do is we're just going to choose any side. I like to start at my side seams. Okay, so this is what you should have so far, and your band will flip up like this. So you can go ahead and flip your band up, and what we're going to do is we're going to find those marks that we made. Which we made on the inside. And see how I can do this where you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to estimate how much our band is going to be flipped over. So we're going to fold our band over, and then we are going to fold over the edge, just like you would a normal seam allowance, just one fold, and then we're going to meet it up with the edge of our other seam. And then we need to figure out exactly where we need our right, so that should be perfect right where I put them. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over these two marks that we made with our buttonhole stitch, because we want our holes to be seamed so they won't fray. And you can just do that right on the inside if you would like. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to go over the first stitch, or the first line that we made. I'm going to be starting with I'm just going to line up the slot with, I'm just going to line up the slot that's in my presser foot right with the line. And then I'm going to do the top of the buttonhole, and then we'll work down, we'll do the top, and then we'll work down this side, do the bottom, and then work up our other side. So you want it to meet it up at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and do my other one, and then I'll come back and show you how to open those. And then we'll move on to the last couple steps. Okay, so you should have your buttonholes. Normally I would just use my seam ripper and open the buttonholes, but I can't seem to find it. So I'm just going to go ahead and very carefully snip it right there, and then open the buttonhole the rest of the way. But it is so much easier if you just have a seam ripper, because then you could just easily open the hole just like you would a seam. You're really not going to see your buttonholes because your drawstring is going to go through it, and it's going to pretty much cover it up. That's why I'm not really too worried. I don't know if you could tell that, but this last buttonhole got a little wonky because my this fabric is very slick, and it got caught underneath the presser foot. So that's why that's a little weird looking. But once we get the tie in, you're not going to even be able to tell. So we're going to flip our skirt wrong side out. And you just want to line up your sides again. You kind of want to push this seam down. And we are going to fold over our waistband just like we did before. So we're going to fold it once. I can already tell this fabric is going to fray really bad. So you're going to fold it once, and then you're going to fold it down to the seam that you made before, and then pin it. You can always take it in and iron it. But like I said, I'm kind of on a time crunch, so I'm not going to bother doing that today. And the reason why we want to line it up like that, because we're going to seam it directly in the seam that we had made before. That way it doesn't show. At least to our best ability. This fabric's being difficult to work with, so that's why this is taking longer than it seems. So what we're going to do is we are going to seam directly in, or we're going to sew directly into this seam right here. And that will tack down our inner seam, and you won't be able to see it on the front. So this is going to be kind of hard because your pins are on the inside, but that's the only way to pin it. I suppose you could pin it from the outside, but I think it would be more difficult with now. If I've done this right, we should be able just to seam directly in that, or sew directly in that seam, and then our band should be closed. Okay, so that's the finished band. This is not normally how I do my bands, but I wanted to go ahead and follow the directions. Normally I just iron it all into the fold. So I'll have both ends folded the way that I showed you, and then I'll fold it in half and I'll iron it all, and then I will seam both sides together is how I normally do it, but I wanted to go ahead and show you how the directions said to do it. So now we're going to do our bottom hem. And we're just going to do a double fold hem. Can you see how bad that's fraying already? I'm very disappointed in this fabric. So you're going to fold it over once and then fold it over again. And then you're just going to seam all the way around the bottom of your skirt. And it really doesn't matter where you start. You want to get as close to the folded edge as possible. And I don't normally backstitch on my hems because it kind of leaves this weird little lump of thread, so just keep that in mind. That's totally up to you whether you want to backstitch at the beginning and the end of your rows. So personally for me, I'm going to go through and I'm going to cut off all of this fraying from the fabric. Now that all the seaming's done, I'm going to go through and cut all that off, but I'll do that after I'm done. So I'm going to turn my skirt right side out. And we're going to put our drawstring in now. So you're just going to find an end of your drawstring and get a large clothespin, or safety pin, not clothespin, and find your buttonholes. Make sure I'm in camera so you can see, and you're just going to thread it through. And you want to try and keep your drawstring fairly straight as you're doing this. And I have the feeling that this drawstring is going to be a little bit longer than what you would actually need, so and then you're just going to pull on that until your ends become even. Okay, so once they're fairly even, just take your safety pin off and you are finished. So you have a very simple skirt with added pockets, which is always a nice feature to add into your skirts, and a drawstring. So here's the finished skirt. I thought I would throw it up on my mannequin and let you guys have a look at it. So it's just a basic skirt, has a drawstring, and we added the extra pockets. So this is what it will sort of look like once it's on a person. Just a basic skirt, but I thought I would go ahead and throw it on my mannequin and let you guys see. So I think it turned out really nice, and I'll be glad to start wearing it or adding it to my wardrobe. So thanks for watching. Have a great day.